What up, folks? What's going on? Welcome to episode 143. 143. I love you. Remember that from Beeper days? 143. The 1 was for the I because it's only one letter. The 4 is for the 4 letters of LOVE. And the 3 was the 3 letters of YOU. 143. And then the cool kids would use 831 for 8 letters, 3 words, 1 meaning. Oh, high school days. And for you younger folks out there, beepers and pagers used to be these little box-like electronic devices that predated cell phones that folks would carry around more so as a fashion statement, because a lot of motherfuckers used to rock beepers that weren't connected, myself included, sometimes. And by not connected, I mean like didn't have like an actual service plan. But, you know, they were like cool looking, these like little boxes that you attach to like your belt or your pocket. Someone could call it, like, you know, calling a phone number, and then leave you a message. And first, back in the day, you could just leave a message such as like a numerical message with the keypad, you know, from a landline phone on the other side. And folks would come up with codes like 143, man, I love you, and 831, and, you know, stuff like that. And most people would, you know, put their number. So you would get a page, an alert. It would start beeping, and you would see somebody's number, and you know that you would have to like call that person back. They're trying to get in touch with you. Then those were upgraded to be able to leave like voicemails on them, and you were also able to, I believe, leave a string of text, like actual text. Like, I don't know if it was like you left it verbally and then it was transcribed onto the beeper screens, or was that like two-way paging? I don't know. Anyways, that's just a mini impromptu history lesson for you folks. Episode 143 of the Spun Today Podcast. That's what this is. And the Spun Today Podcast is the podcast that is anchored in writing, but unlimited in scope. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz, and I appreciate you listening. In this episode, I speak about watching the final season of Orange is the New Black, which I finished a minute ago, but I haven't shared it with you fine folks here on the show. I also speak about a hip-hop doc called Stretch and Bobbito, Radio That Changed Lives. Shout out to my brother David that put me on to watching that one. I speak about the movie The Irishman and also UFC 245. All that and more once we return from a very quick way that you can help support the Spun Today Podcast if you so choose. And by the way, happy 2020. This is the first official episode of the new year. Wishing you folks much health and prosperity to you and yours in this coming year. And if you'd like to share some of that prosperity this way, here's a way that you can help do that. You know that feeling that you get on a Monday when you're sad because the weekend is over and you have nothing to look forward to except for lunch? Have no fear, the Midday Monday Boost Letter is here. And you might be thinking, what is the Midday Monday Boost Letter? Sounds like a mouthful. And it is, but it's also more than that. I put together this absolutely free newsletter that I email to all my subscribers every Monday at noon to spread a little joy and happiness. If you choose to subscribe, all you have to do is go to spuntoday.com/subscribe and drop in your email address. And what you'll get is 5 things. You'll get a photo of the week, which who doesn't like looking at dope pictures? You'll also get a podcast of the week. I listen to dozens and dozens of podcasts every single week from a wide variety of shows, and I cherry pick the very best ones and share them with you as my recommendation for that week. Also in the Midday Monday Boost Letter, you will find a video of the week, which could be anything from a cool online recipe that I found, to a rap battle, to a TED Talk, or a dope interview. I also share a quote of the week, a little food for thought, as well as a word of the week for my fellow wordsmiths out there. Again, this is all absolutely free, and you can get my newsletter by going to spuntoday.com/subscribe. Drop in your email address, and you will get the very next one. Now, I might wind up recording this episode in like 2 sittings because I just found out from a Neil Brennan post on Instagram that Dave Chappelle is being awarded with the Mark Twain Award tonight on PBS at 9 p.m. Eastern. And I definitely want to watch that. So I might pause this midway, go watch that, and maybe finish the recording after the fact. And if not, I'll wrap it up mañana. Anyways, Orange is the New Black, Season 7, the final season of Orange is the New Black. If I'm not mistaken, I shared all my feedback from each of the previous seasons of Orange as I watched them over the years. And this is one of those shows that was a Netflix original, was one of their like bangers. Usually like their originals, you know, they have like 1 or 2, maybe 3 seasons. This one went on for 7 seasons. It was one of like, I think like the early hits early on in Netflix streaming at least. And I personally thought it was a phenomenal show. I have some points here that I wrote down while I was watching the show. Again, I finished it a couple months ago. I just hadn't gotten around to recording an episode about it. And usually what I do while I'm watching a show or a movie or right after it, I like jot down certain points or things or scenes or lines of dialogue that like resonated with me that I liked and that I eventually want to use to share on the podcast. And sometimes it could be like days later when I'm thinking about the show or the movie or happen to think about it and I come up with something else that I find interesting, you know, I jot that down. So I say all that just to say that none of what I'm about to share is in like any particular order or anything like that. But yeah, just some cool takeaways that I got from Season 7 of Orange is the New Black, the final season, which is currently and still streaming on Netflix. You know, it was crazy sad. One of the things, this was like a morose season. Is that the right word? Is that the right use of the word? I think the use is right. I'm not sure if the word is actually right. Morose. Anyway, it was a sad season in many respects. It dealt with immigration and injustices around some folks caught up in that system. It dealt with mental illness, heavy, especially when it came to like Lorna, when it came to Tasty thinking about killing herself for like more than half the season, addiction issues with folks like Daya, other mental illness related issues that hit home for me personally with Red having Alzheimer's or dementia. There were redemption stories with Aleida getting out and trying to do right, but winding up doing wrong again. Or with Maria finding Jesus and shit. Joe Paterno being caught up in the whole like Me Too movement. There's a lot of layers, a lot of different things going on in this season. Something for everybody, if you will. But yeah, back to what I was referring to that was really sad with Lorna is that she, I don't know if you guys remember, she wound up like getting pregnant during a visit from her husband a season or 2 before that, you know, they like had a guard to look the other way or I forgot how they finagled it, but they wound up like banging on top of or against rather the vending machines. And she winds up getting pregnant, winds up having a baby, and the baby is sick and winds up dying. And that's obviously would hit home for like any parent, but it was like sad seeing her like deal with that. And the way she dealt with it was that she didn't tell anybody. She like internalized it, denied it, like never came to terms with it, and it like drove her nuts. But she would, to like all her friends in jail and the prison and stuff, she would just continue like speaking about the baby like as if it was alive. And they have some of them have like phones that they smuggled in or they had smuggled in, and you know, they go online, they have Instagram accounts and shit, and she like keeps posting pictures of the baby by going onto by like Googling images of babies that she felt like looked like hers, and she would like put different pictures up of different babies and stuff. It was like sad to see her like go through that shit. There was one scene that I found pretty cool, a line from it rather, when Nikki is sitting with Lorna like consoling her and shit, and they are actually both on cell phones and just sitting next to each other. And Nikki goes, "We're 2 friends spending parallel quality time together, just as nature intended." I thought that was pretty funny, and definitely a testament to the times of today when like sitting next to somebody and both of you are like on your phones, or multiple of yous are on the phone. I'm guilty of it myself, but it's something that I always think is funny when I'm on like the outside looking on the opposite side of it and I see people like doing it. The show also deals with homelessness and like people getting out of the prison and things not going right for them and then winding up like on the streets. Would you guys want to hear a sick stat? If I'm not mistaken, Los Angeles is like the most rampant city in the United States with homelessness. And if I'm wrong, somebody, reach out, let me know. Hit me up on Twitter at Spun Today. But according to the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, there's approximately 60,000 homeless people in Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles, not the entire state of California, the city of Los Angeles today. 60,000. Like, they literally have areas of Los Angeles that they've named Tent City because it's just like blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks of folks like living in tents, living in the street. That's crazy. But yeah, the show delves a little bit into that by portraying my homegirl, Cindy Hayes, and someone that wound up like leaving her mom's house after getting out because of some issues that she had there. And she pretty much like ran away and wound up just living in the streets. And I followed her around a bit. And I call her my homegirl because I actually saw her on the train. So I think I have the right to call her that now. We're friends. We're BFFs. No, but I did see her, Cindy Hayes, Adrian Seymour, which plays Cindy Hayes. I saw her on the train. I walk on. I'm standing, coming home from work. It's rush hour. I'm standing towards like the back of the train where she is as well. And she's with another guy that, wasn't like right next to her. But, like sometimes when you're with somebody but the train is packed, you like can't fit next to each other, really. He was like by the door and she was more by like holding onto the railing in front of the seats. There's like 3 seats by like the end on most trains. And then I was like right by her and I looked at her a couple times and she looked at me and I was kind of like I knew who she was instantly. Which she was like a lot thinner and like shorter than she is on the show. Or, shorter. I picture her being like mad tall for some reason. But and I'm not tall myself. But I couldn't think of her fucking name. I definitely didn't know her real name, which I looked up and I now know is Adrian Moore. But I couldn't think of her name on the show. And I was like, fuck, man. Like I want to say, yo, Cindy, what's up? Or like something. I couldn't think of any of the characters' names on the show. So I just like awkwardly looked at her a couple times and then she wound up like having to like say excuse me to me to like get off the train like on her stop. I think she got off like on Nostrand or something like that. And I was like, yeah, I thought that was fucking cool. I saw Cindy Hayes on the train. And then you know what happened to me? A couple days later, literally, I saw Colin Quinn on the train as well. I was leaving work and he was like buying a MetroCard at one of the machines. And I was like, oh shit. And again, I couldn't think of his fucking name. And I had literally just seen, like, I know who Colin Quinn is, like, as a comic. And I had literally recently had just seen the Red State, Blue State thing that he did on a special that he did on Netflix. And I really liked which was really good, by the way. And I really liked, he did a New York Story back in the day also. Not even that back in the day. I think it was, like, on Netflix. Or maybe HBO. But that was, like, really dope. And I was like, fuck, I couldn't think of his fucking name. He was like by himself there, like trying to figure out like how to buy a MetroCard or something. And then I walked down to the train and then I Googled, Red State, Blue State, or either that or the New York Story. And, his name popped up and I was like, fuck, Colin Quinn. Then I was like on a streak of like seeing famous people, which has never happened to me before. Maybe like once or twice ever, but I can't remember any. Then a couple weeks after that, I was on, I was leaving the Intrepid Museum because I did I'm not sure if I mentioned this on the podcast or not, but I did like a 9/11 volunteer thing through work where we like packaged food for homeless folks. And leaving it, me and my boy from work, I see somebody get out of a cab and I was like, oh shit, look, it's Kevin Bacon. And I actually remembered the name. I was like proud of myself. I was like, fuck. I actually like got his name. My boy was like, is it? Are you sure? And I was like, yo, Kev. And I like waved and he like looked over and gave me like a head nod and waved. And then, he kept walking, we kept walking. I was like, oh shit. And then this lady like wound up like coming down to me and saying, what's that actor's name? The one that was just there? And I was like, Kevin Bacon. She was like, Kevin Bacon. So she was like how I was a couple weeks before with Colin Quinn and Adrian Moore. Anyways, I digress. Immigration ice courts. This is something else that this show tackles, which if there's any shred ounce of truth to the way that they depicted this, it's fucking horrendous. So the show plays on the whole narrative of folks crossing the border illegally and, children being separated from their parents and stuff like that, and stories like that. And it also speaks to, which was like a through line through the last like few seasons, the private prison system and how private prisons, as you all know, have a focus on the bottom line rather than actual rehabilitation, because it's a for-profit private prison. They get paid based on the number of inmates that they have. So it's in their best interest to make sure that recidivism is high, people aren't getting rehabilitated. Lobbyists from private prison contractors, prison guard unions, make sure to lobby politicians to put their thumbs on tipping the scales towards passing stricter laws and unjust laws that happen to incarcerate folks at higher rates. A famous example of this is like the coke versus crack penalty. I think it was something like 100-1, and then it was lowered under the Obama administration to 8-1, which still, makes absolutely no sense. It's literally the same drug. Coke and crack both come from cocaine. Just one is snorted up the nose, and then another one is mixed with baking soda and water and warmed up and turned into a rock and then smoked. But chemically, it's literally the same exact thing. But poorer folks, mainly people of color, black and brown folks, were more so users of crack versus wealthier folks that more prevalently use cocaine. But the sentencing would literally used to be 100-1 difference, then lowered to 8-1 difference, and I think it may have been now lowered to like 3-1 or ratio wise. Anyway, the point is that these prison systems are set up to make money, to optimize the bottom line however they can. They definitely touch on that in this season, as well as season 6, season 5. But they add the element here of the immigration courts. And what this private prison did was, instead of using money to ship the inmates to court, via, bust them to court and then bust them back, and all the costs associated with that, what they did was build a courtroom within the prison. And then they would just have a judge there pretty much around the clock and do what was called, to speed up the sentencing process. The more folks they sentence, the more they save on not having to bust them around, and also the more money they make per inmate. And they just showed like sad stories of like a mother that was there that, did cross the border illegally. Her children were born in the US, so she was like separated from them. They were staying with a foster family. She was like a single mom because their father died, and she worked like 2 jobs, and she came to the States because of the fact that her husband died, and the kids, they lived like in a bad neighborhood that was like riddled with violence, and she wanted to get her kids away from that. And I'm definitely not saying that, her coming over illegally is right. Obviously it's legally wrong, but morally she was right for doing what she did. I would do it for my kid. I would take that risk to get them out of harm's way. There's a stark difference between that and gang members and drug dealers and, just like freeloaders that cross over illegally. You know what I mean? Like, you have to make a distinction. Just like no American person is the same. Like, everybody listening to this episode right now, we have similarities, but none of us are the same, right? I don't think, it's fair to paint folks coming over the border, illegally or not, with the same brush. But yeah, it shows like those types of stories and The saddest part of that whole storyline was that they showed the kids that were like separated from their parents, and they were like just the kids. Like it's a full courtroom. You have children like 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, and the judge is just like going through the motions and saying, "Do you agree that statute 1238734 was broken when you illegally crossed the border from Mexico to the U.S.?" And there's a fucking 5-year-old saying, "I want my mom." You know, like, they don't know what the fuck they're saying. And then the judge is like, "Well, since you are unable to ask for your own counsel and didn't answer the question correctly, you are being deported." You know, it's like, holy shit. It's like, if there's any shred of truth, if anything similar to that is happening, like really happening, shame on whoever the fuck continues to allow that to happen and that put those mechanisms in place to facilitate that happening. Fuck you and the rotten twat hole that you came from. What else was dope about this season? Pusey's cameo, which was done like in it was like a flashback, obviously, because she died as a character on the show, when one of the inexperienced prison guards was like holding her down and she couldn't breathe and she wound up dying. She, in this season, that happened a couple seasons ago, in this season made a cameo in flashback form when Tasty, who found out that she got pretty much fucked over with this whole riot that happened the season before, and, you know, people ratting people out and pretty much pinned it on her, even though it wasn't her that wound up killing a police officer, but a few of the inmates got together, including her friend, Cindy Hayes, which is who I was speaking about before, pretty much for them to get time off and not to get additional time added, wound up pinning everything on Tasty, who wound up getting like life in jail. So she goes through this whole season slipping further and further down the drain, getting darker and darker, and thinking about killing herself. And when that reaches a fever pitch, there's a scene where she's like walking down the hall to presumably do it, you know, like off herself. And she sees like a flickering light in the hallway. And then there's a flashback scene to her and Pusey talking on the phone. And during that conversation, there's like a flickering light, or Pusey says something about a flickering light. And the whole conversation that they have is like a double meaning type of conversation that applies to what they're speaking about then, and also as advice to Tasty now in the present. And it winds up deterring her from actually killing herself. The character of that plays Doggett, I forget her, what was her full name on the show? Tiffany Doggett. She winds up killing herself, or ODing. I don't think they actually get into if it was on purpose or not, but it seemed like it was. Tasty winds up finding purpose and a reason to stay alive, and keeping Pusey's name alive by starting a prison fund called the Pusey Washington Fund. And it's a way to give microloans to prisoners getting out of jail to help them get on their feet, because she realized through tutoring that she was doing in the prison for the GED exam that there was a gap financially that needed to be filled for between prisoners that got out of prison and when they would be able to obtain employment. So this fund is meant to bridge that gap and give prisoners a sense of responsibility in paying back these microloans, so on and so forth. And it's actually, if you text PW Fund, Pusey Washington Fund, just a PW Fund, to 41411, it's something that I guess the folks at Netflix actually set up. So do that for some more info. I thought that was pretty cool. A little art spilling over into reality. What else? Piper, her indecisive ass, finally made a decision and stuck to it. At the very end, her character finally got over the hump of that arc there. And I thought it was really cool at the end. All the characters kind of sort of like made a cameo appearance. And by all the characters, I mean like the characters that weren't necessarily a focal point of this season. And they were characters that in the previous season, if you remember, they were, when they closed down Litchfield Prison, they split up a lot of the inmates. And then the story I obviously followed one set of inmates with in the jail, which is the ones, mainly that I was speaking about now. But all the other ones that were in previous seasons went presumably to other jails. So they kind of like made a cameo and went to like the jails and places that they were at. Some people got out, and it showed like, where are they now type of thing. I thought that was a pretty cool way to button up the show and wrap things up. But yeah, that was season 7, the final season of Orange is the New Black. It's a dope series, a Netflix original, and you folks should check it out if you're interested. Next up is Stretch and Bobbito, radio that changed lives. This is a documentary that I believe is on Netflix. It might be on HBO. So this is a documentary about an underground rap radio show started by DJ Stretch Armstrong, which is a lanky white dude. He recruited Bobbito Garcia, which is a Spanish guy, my guess would be Puerto Rican, to host the show. Stretch Armstrong was a club DJ in the 80s around New York, and Bobbito worked at Def Jam doing like show promotions. And while Stretch was going to Columbia University, he had this idea of starting the show, and it wound up becoming like the place to be for any and all hip hop artists. It became like this iconic show that each and every one of those artists like praise to this day. And it was like in terms of influence and impact, and it was just like a raw, rugged, honest, put together show where all these artists, which I'm gonna rattle off some of their names in a bit, but like where they wanted to be. And it was like this rinky-dink little college radio station on Columbia University's campus that aired in the 90s from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. And I thought it was really dope that Robert Bobbito Garcia wrote the screenplay for this doc and directed it and put it together. It's dope for me to see when anybody's passionate about anything. And it definitely shines through how much these guys were into rap and hip hop. And they like show like some video clips from back in the day. They play a lot of audio recordings because I guess there was less video back then. And they used to record each of their radio shows on cassette tapes. According to Wikipedia, there's 212 of them, 4 hours long each, so do the math. And something they did in the documentary is they interviewed like all these big name artists today and played for them from the VHS tapes. And I'm talking about artists like Jay-Z, Nas, Fat Joe. They would interview them and play them clips of those artists being on the show way back then. And it's like dope to see the reactions and look like they were just like handed a piece of history that they had lost. Or maybe they like had with them like internally, like internalized, but definitely not something that you can like pull up on YouTube. You know what I mean? I remember there's this dope freestyle by Big L and Jay-Z called the 7-minute freestyle that I remember from being younger being like one of those songs or freestyles that I would play and people like would ask, oh shit, who's that? Where'd you get that? I hadn't heard that before. And it's just dope by both Big L, rest in peace, and Jay-Z, a young Jay-Z at the time. And I found out from watching this that was recorded on Stretch and Bobbito, which I thought was dope. But I'm going to give you guys a list of some of the folks that were on this show during their span. These are all unsigned artists at the time when they're wanting, they're hungry artists that want to be on this one radio show that actually gets it, that actually gets this hip hop thing. And there's a stat that says that all of these unsigned artists that were on the show wound up going on to sell 300 million plus records. Not $300 million worth of records. That would be crazy in and of itself. But 300 million records sold. That's fucking bonkers. So here's some of the names: Nas, Biggie, Wu-Tang, All of Wu-Tang, by the way. All of Wu-Tang. Jay-Z, Big L, Big Pun, Eminem, Cypress Hill, Busta Rhymes, which says in the documentary that he used to record the Stretch and Bobbito show himself at home and then go to school, make a couple copies, and then go to school that week and sell the cassettes for $5. Fat Joe, Lauryn Hill, Common, Q-Tip, The Roots, KRS-One, Talib Kweli. Shout out to the People's Party podcast, by the way, by Talib Kweli. It's pretty dope. You guys should check it out. Royce the 5'9", Sway, Rosie Perez, Angie Martinez, DJ Premier, etc., etc., etc. The list goes on and on. It is definitely a dope piece of hip-hop history, New York history, radio history, and you folks should definitely check it out. Stretch and Bobbito. Radio that changed lives. Next up is The Irishman. I thought this was a great movie. The Golden Globes actually just happened a few days ago, and it was nominated for Best Director, Best Supporting Actor for Al Pacino, Best Supporting Actor for Joe Pesci, the director obviously Martin Scorsese, Best Drama, and Best Screenplay by Steven Zalian. And it was a very highly anticipated movie. I first heard about it, I want to say maybe like a year and a half ago, maybe a year ago. I had forgotten about it. And I was definitely looking forward to it, as most folks were. It's a Scorsese movie, a gangster movie. It's the first time Al Pacino and Robert De Niro were getting together, I think, since Heat. And it was for a Scorsese gangster movie to boot. So it was just awesome all around. Al Pacino does a great job at playing Jimmy Hoffa in the movie, the Teamsters union boss, who is notoriously known for supposedly being buried under home plate at Yankee Stadium because he pissed some mobsters off, but he was like affiliated with the mob. And the main thing that this movie was, which by the way was long as shit, 3 hours and a half, I believe, and it didn't feel that way at all. Like I wanted more after it was done. It took me 3 days to watch it, and I definitely still wanted more. I thought it was really dope. The message that I get from the movie, I can best state with a Robert Frost quote, which is, quote, "In 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on," end quote. And that's what I get from it. And life happens, regardless of the route that you take in it. Good, bad, indifferent. Life just happens. Robert De Niro, which does a fantastic job, plays a hitman for the mob. He's an Irish guy, but he's taken under the wing of Joe Pesci's character, who's a made guy in the Italian mafia. And De Niro is relentlessly loyal to a fault, but not to his family or even friends, to that G code, that gangster shit. That is seemingly all he knows, all he'll allow himself to understand and be okay with. He was a provider for his family financially, but that's it. That's where it ended. He had like zero emotional connection with his wife or kids. When his wife died, he pretty much went home after the funeral and just like grabbed her cigarettes that she had lying around and just tossed them in the trash, like as he was walking in through the door. He kind of sort of wanted to reconnect with his kids towards the end of his life, but even that felt like kind of forced. In the final scene of the movie, he is having a conversation with a priest that went to visit him at the home that he lived in. And he says to the priest as he walks out, "Father, do me a favor. Don't shut the door all the way. I don't like that. Leave it open a little bit." And I guess you could break that line down into meaning leaving the door open towards the like path of redemption, his not wanting to be all the way bad, and trying to balance that throughout his life, him not wanting the father to write him off as a lost cause, all that stuff, along with obviously the physicality of not closing the door all the way. And as the camera pans out, you see how small his life ended up being. You see him in a home by himself, in a chair, in a small room, surrounded by people just doing their jobs in the nursing home, and every personal connection that he's ever had just deteriorated around him. But yeah, I thought it was a great movie. They played these like older gangsters, right? Joe Pesci specifically stole the show from me. He was like a cool, calm, and collected gangster for once, as opposed to all his other like gangster roles. But they even slid in like a nod to all his previous roles with like a one-liner when Pesci tells De Niro that fucking Jew, which I just took as like being an homage to the whole "you Jew motherfucker, you" famous Pesci line. So they played these older gangsters, and there's a lot of flashback scenes that were done with the actual actors. You know, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, which are all older gentlemen. And they use CGI to make them like look younger. I heard a lot of people say, or a few people, you know, I didn't really keep a tally, but I heard more than once people say that was distracting, that took away from the movie, that kind of like ruined it for them. But I honestly didn't even like notice it at all. So I thought it was like a dope job. It could be because I actually saw the movie on my phone while commuting like from home from work, like over 3 days. I just watched it on my phone. So maybe, you know, the small screen and what's the output, like 480p or something like that on the phone. Maybe that's why I didn't like pick up on it. Maybe, you know, at the theater or on a bigger TV screen, that comes out more. I guess I'll notice when I rewatch, but for me, it didn't like faze me at all. I didn't even notice it, at least not in a distracting way. And something else that was really dope is that there was a lot of like great actors in it, a lot of comics. Sebastian Maniscalco's in it. Jim Norton plays Don Rickles. Ray Romano's in it. Action Bronson's in it. Dasha Polanco's in it. Bobby Cannavale's in it. My boy Chip Rossetti. But yeah, definitely great movie. Worth a watch. You guys should check it out. The Irishman, now streaming currently on Netflix. UFC 245 was a dope card. I find myself saying that a lot about UFC cards, but what can I say? They put together a good show, good promotion, good product. The first fight that I saw was, which I think was the first one, the first on the main card. Maybe it was the undercard, actually. I'm trying to think. Anyway, it was Uriah Faber's fight, which I don't know why he came back. I mean, Uriah Faber, a legend, Hall of Famer, California kid. Guys, if you retire, stay retired. I hate when fighters retire or leave for whatever reason. They wind up coming back and do badly. Then it's like they're like chasing the dragon type of thing. And I'm not a fighter, obviously, by any stretch. But I liken that to like any pursuit or profession. Once you call it, you call it. Stick to it. Do something else. Because then you have like a hungry up-and-comer. Or not necessarily up-and-comer, but in Uriah's case, it was Peter Yan that, you know, schooled him. He definitely outclassed him. Uriah had a nasty cut, and Peter Yan TKO'd him in the third round. Then next up was the Marlon Moraes and Jose Aldo fight. And I actually tweeted earlier on in the week, I saw an interview or a picture of an interview with Aldo while he was doing his press run and Ariel. And Jose Aldo, which cut down from 45 to 35, I think for the first time, looked like fucking Skeletor. Like he looked drained. Horrible. And he came into this fight and looked fucking spectacular, in my opinion. Best that I've seen him in a while. Like, looked like he has a future in the 35 division if he can continue to make the weight. He's obviously a Hall of Famer also, legend, but someone that started early and is fairly young. He's like in his early 30s, if I'm not mistaken. Just has a lot of like fights under his belt, a lot of mileage. And to me, he looks stronger. Oh, he's 33 years old, actually. He looks stronger than Moraes. He was walking through Moraes' punches, just eating them. And I thought Jose Aldo won, but the decision was ultimately given to Marlon Moraes. And like I thought clearly Jose Aldo won. He thought so too, seemingly. At the end of the fight, like when they called it, he was like kind of like, what the fuck? Put his hands up in the air type of thing, and was talking to Marlon, and I couldn't make out exactly what they were saying. But body language wise, it seemed like he was like, oh, come on, that was a bullshit decision or something like that. So yeah, I think it was robbed. Then next we had the women's bantamweight title bout between Amanda Nunes and Germaine de Randamie. Nunes fucked up the Randamie in the first round, I thought. And she got it to the ground and pounded the fuck out of her. She had her knee on her belly. She arm triangled her. But the Randamie made it through and made it out. Then in the second round, it was mostly the Randamie, like while they were standing up. And Nunes had to resort to takedowns. She definitely had a clear advantage on the ground with her jiu-jitsu. And the Randamie actually had a big head kick and knees to the head that seemed to rock Amanda. And Amanda took her to the ground and rode out the rest of that round. Then Amanda went back to dominating in the third with her ground game, her wrestling. She actually took an up kick from the Randamie, which wobbled her, but she got through it. Then in the fourth, it was more Nunes. She continued to dominate on the ground. The Randamie got caught in a triangle that transitioned into an arm bar, and then she slipped out of it. And even though it was like heavy groundwork, heavy jiu-jitsu, which we're not used to seeing from Amanda, it was a dope fight. It was an exciting fight, and she got the W. She retained her title. And she actually said on the mic that the game plan was to go 5 rounds. Like, she wanted to showcase her other skills, namely on the ground, and not that she's just a knockout artist. And by the way, DC's commentary, Daniel Cormier's commentary, is like a masterclass for what fighters can be doing or could have done better. Like, if fighters like go back and watch their own fights, they should definitely watch it with the commentary. If it's like Rogan, DC, in this case specifically, Dominic Cruz is another favorite of mine in terms of like fight IQ, but DC is like in a class on his own. Like, they can learn. To me, it felt like they can learn from his commentary, just the way he delivers it, the way he gives like pointers and should have done this to try to get that position. He's definitely one of the GOATs in fighting and also in commentary. Then we have the Holloway and Volkanovski fight, the co-main event of the evening for the 145-pound strap. That one of my favorites, Max Holloway, for the first time in a long time, lost to Alexander Volkanovski. And I want to repeat the weight class that they're fighting in, 145. Just to say that Volkanovski used to weigh 250 pounds. And he used to be a rugby player. And he got down to 145 for this fight. Which is insane. I mean, he's been a fighter for a long time, but he used to play rugby, and when he did, he weighed 250 pounds. That's literally over 100 pounds more than his fight weight, which is insane to me. But Holloway, to me, and to most, I don't think it's like really debatable, is the best featherweight of all time. But Volkanovski fought a great fight. He had a shitload of leg kicks, which seemed to bother the hell out of Holloway during the fight, and came away with the W. Basically on points. Not basically, literally on points, because it went to decision. And according to Max on Rogan's podcast, the leg kicks looked a lot worse than what they were. He said like that night, he went out like partying or clubbing or whatever, as he had planned, like win or lose, and his leg was like never an issue, and he had gotten like hurt and rocked much worse in other fights that he ultimately won. So although he didn't agree with the decision, he tipped his hat to Volkanovski and obviously said he would love to do it again, a rematch if that's what's offered to him. But during the fight, like watching the fight, like by round 2, like Max's legs were like completely like chewed up from leg kicks. Like his left leg was so fucked up to the point that Max had to wind up like switching stances. I don't know if he did that unconsciously or because it hurt or because maybe it was part of his game plan or not, but it was definitely something that visibly bothered him during the fight. Max, as usual, had like a bunch of successful like boxing flurries. You know, he's a very creative puncher and has awesome movement. So that's always a treat to watch. Well, I was watching, I'm not a professional judge, obviously, although I can't imagine I'd be much worse. But I would have given Volkanovski, I thought he won the first and the third. And the fourth might have been Holloway's due to like the combinations that were and like heavy strikes that were thrown. But Volkanovski just outstruck Max in every single round. And he wound up winning a unanimous decision. And fun fact, he is a training partner of Stylebenders, Israel Adesanya. I thought that was pretty interesting. And last but not least, the very much anticipated Kamaru Usman versus Colby Covington. This is Kamaru Usman's first fight back after beating Tyron Woodley, one of the most dominating welterweight champions of all time, versus Trump's favorite UFC fighter, Colby Covington, the epic Trump troll, MAGA hat wearing, cheap suit wearing, great fighter that has a gas tank that lasts for days. These two guys were very much so known for their wrestling. It's crazy to see that they stayed standing the entire time. I don't think not one attempted a takedown like throughout the entire fight. And if they did, it was maybe like towards the end, towards when they had a couple scrambles. But it was back and forth the first round. Usman had some wins. Colby had some wins. Back and forth, dead even, I would say. In the second round, it was more of the same. But there was a lot more volume as expected from Colby's side. But the harder shots were coming from Usman. Kamaru was definitely hitting Colby with some hard shots to the body specifically. The third was a lot more of the same. And then going into the fourth, Colby told his corner, which was picked up in the audio, that he thinks his jaw is broken. Then the camera crew started showing like instant replays of where they thought his jaw actually did get broken. And, you know, like Rogan, DC, and these guys added like the commentary around that. And it definitely was. It shows like a straight, I want to say right, but maybe it was a straight left. I think it was a right though, a straight right down the pike directly on Colby's jaw. And you see that shit like go to the other side of his head. What was most impressive though is that during that, you know, that was going into the fourth round. During the fourth round, like Colby may have won the fourth round. Like there was very competitive back and forth. And with a broken jaw, it was like super impressive. Going into the fifth, I would have said it was like 2-2. Like 2 rounds to 2 rounds. Maybe 3-1 for Usman, but I wouldn't have been upset if it was 2-2. Then in the fifth, Kamaru stepped it up a notch more. He knocked Colby down twice, both times with like less than a minute to go. And then like hammer fists and TKO'd him, which I'm sure was a nice feather in his cap. Nice way to end it. Guy that was talking massive amounts of shit for a very long time. You know, he really plays up that heel character. To be able to literally shut him up and break his mouth, it has to feel good on some level for Kamaru. So hats off to him. Hats off to UFC 245. And hats off to you fine folks for listening to the first episode of 2020 of the Spun Today Podcast. This is episode 143. I appreciate you guys listening. It's about to be midnight here on the East Coast, and your boy got to wake up early mañana. So I'm out, but please do stick around, listen to some tunes, and to a couple ways you can help support the podcast if you so choose. Peace.
I'm just sitting on your front porch, wondering how could I be so far from my home. And my mind is somewhere else, but when I find it, I'll patch up where it's been blown. Now I'm just floating on the breeze, and I feel I'm falling like these leaves. I must be cornerstone. Oh, but when I reach that ground, I'll share this peace of mind I found. I can feel it in my bones, but it's gonna take a little time for me to set that parking brake and let myself unwind. Shine that light on me. I'll sit and tell you my stories.
Hey folks, Tony here, and I hope you're enjoying the show as much as I enjoy putting it together for you. If you'd like to support, I'd really appreciate it, and we'll give you a one-stop shop of sorts on how to do so. If you can make your way over to spuntoday.com/support, you'll find a bunch of different ways where you can do just that. There you'll find an Amazon banner similar to the other banners found throughout my website that you can click on and will take you to Amazon, where you can do your shopping like you normally do. This will not cost you anything extra, and Amazon will pay me a percentage just for driving traffic to their website. It's a great way to help support the show financially without actually having to come out of pocket. At spuntoday.com/support, you'll also find links to my Patreon and Ko-fi pages. Patreon and Ko-fi are two similar websites where you can set up reoccurring donations for the show. If you want to donate $1 per month, $1 per episode, $100 per episode, whatever you like. You can check out either one of those two services there. There's actually also a Patreon video that's kind of like a little tutorial explanation video of how Patreon actually works. Also at spuntoday.com/support, you'll find a direct donation button where you can donate by way of PayPal. You'll find a link to Apple Music, which works similar to the Amazon banner. You can click on it, it'll take you to Apple's website where you can do your purchasing like you normally do. And again, it does not cost you anything extra, but I will get paid a percentage just for driving traffic to their website. And you'll also find links to the Spun Today Viral Style store. This is where you can get Spun Today related merch. And you'll find things like these cool premium t-shirts that have writing related sayings on them that I put together myself. I'm definitely not a clothing designer by any stretch of the imagination, but I put together things that I wanted to see and wear myself. A couple of my favorites are the one that says "Writing is life," and another one that says "Write need every day," and it has like a puff of smoke looking design right behind those words. You'll also find a Spun Today coffee mug and a really cool color changing mug that's related to my debut novel, Fractal. It's completely black, and when it gets hot, when you put it in coffee or tea, it starts changing to white, and it also exposes the cover art for my novel, Fractal. It's pretty dope. So definitely check all that stuff out, which again, you can find by going to spuntoday.com/support. And of course, do not forget to follow me on all of your social media, at Spun Today on Twitter, at Spun Today on Instagram. Subscribe to the Spun Today YouTube channel, where you can find clips and excerpts from the podcast, along with other cool content. Like the Facebook page at facebook.com/Spun Today. Also, don't forget to check out all the free shit that I have on my website as well. Go to spuntoday.com/free writing. And there you're going to find dozens and dozens and dozens of free writing pieces that you can check out for motivation and inspiration and just some general food for thought. You can check out some of my photography at spuntoday.com/photography. Feel free to take any of those pictures and use them as you wish. I set it up so that you can like copy and download the photos. And my short stories are available at spuntoday.com/short stories. And last but certainly not least, my Pride and Joy Corner, spuntoday.com/books. Here you will find my published books, which you fine folks can find links to purchase them on Amazon, whether you want hard copies or digital Kindle copies. That's the spot for you. Thank you very much for being a Spun Today listener. And as always, substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. Thanks for listening.